Hello and welcome back to the VolReport Show. I'm Ryan Sylvia with VolReport.com on the Rivals Network, and I'm joined by Mason Choate of HogBeat.com, Arkansas site on the Rivals Network. And with Tennessee traveling to Fayetteville this weekend, Mason, thank you for hopping on to preview things that are going to go down in this SEC clash. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ryan. I'm excited to just be back in Fayetteville. Arkansas all of the first 5 games, 5 different venues. So not only has the team been traveling, but covering the team, you got to travel with them. So it'll be nice to just leave my house and go to the stadium instead of have to drive to a different city and stay in a hotel. So a little bit of a convenience factor for this game. Also, just the fact that Tennessee bringing the number 4 team in the country.
Yeah.
Night game, 6:30. It's going to be prime time. Should be fun. I'm excited.
Yeah, striping out the stadium, so it should be a fun atmosphere. I didn't put that together, though. I guess Pine Bluff, what was that in Little Rock?
It was. So that it's so annoying. And it's a big debate in Arkansas of like, should Arkansas play in Little Rock at War Memorial Stadium? A lot of historical games played there, but at this point in time, it doesn't make sense for them to play there. But it's considered a home game. And so Arkansas opened the season against UAPB in Little Rock, and then you have to go to Oklahoma State after that. They lost that in double overtime, should have won that game. And then you come back and you play down to UAB, only beat them by 10 points, and UAB is not a good football team. Had a great game playing against Arkansas. And then you go and you lose to Texas, or no, then you go and beat Auburn. So that's then 4 different venues, and then you got to go play Texas A&M at AT&T Stadium. And so like it's just been tough, and that doesn't. I mean, Auburn's played 5 straight games at home
Mm-hmm.
to open the season, so it's kind of unfair to Arkansas, but it is what it is. It's the cards that Arkansas was dealt. It came out of this 3-2 with losses to Oklahoma State and Texas A&M, and you can look at those 2 games and say you should have won them. And unfortunately for Arkansas, they didn't. But 3-2, I think is probably good for Arkansas at this point, given the fact that you could have won the other 2 games, but I don't know, man. There's still we're going to get into it more, but there's still a lot of questionable decisions being made, just some weird coaching decisions that just make you scratch your head and make you a little bit worried about this football team.
So, what do you think the general feeling is in Fayetteville? Is it like what Josh Heupel said, where it's like, man, you're 2 plays away from being undefeated and probably a top 25 team? Or is there a lot more frustration, especially given how maybe last year went?
I think it's a mix of both because you after last season there was a ton of frustration. Then you have the off season and you hire Bobby Petrino. You get a little bit of excitement in the fan base. Like that's really the only hire that you can think of that's like, how can how can we get people to be excited after a 4-8 season? You go and hire Bobby Petrino. That got people excited, and that 70-0 scored on 10 straight drives to start the season against UAPB. That was as good as you could draw it up. And then you go and they had like 600 plus yards of total offense against Oklahoma State. And so, you lost that game in double overtime, but you were still feeling good. You were like, man, on paper, Arkansas should have won that game. You look at all the stats from that game, Arkansas should have won. They just completely blew them out of the water as far as offensively goes. And just a few plays didn't go their way. They had a muff punt. They had a pick six. Like those things are going to lose you football games. And they missed 2 field goals. Like you can't have that happen, especially on the road. Now it's tough looking at Oklahoma State. They're not as good as maybe we thought they were back in week 2. And so all that to say, like it feels good that you've had some promising performances and you feel like you're just right there and you have the talent on the team. I think it's a more talented team than last year, and I think that's pretty obvious. And I feel like maybe they have better leadership than they did last year from a player perspective. The offensive staff is pretty new. Bobby Petrino is way better than Dan Enos, that's for sure. Like Dan Enos was a complete and utter failure. So like those things are good, but then you're still looking at it and you look at the A&M game and you look at a few different decisions like in on one drive in the second half that A&M ends up scoring on, they have like their third team defensive line in on key third downs.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't understand why that was happening. They had a weird fake field goal that everybody and their mother knew it was going to be a fake, and they call a timeout just to then run the fake again, and it didn't work. Luckily, A&M didn't score, but like those are the things that keep happening that while you're almost there, as a fan, you're like, all right, we're in year 5 of this, and this stuff keeps happening, and we're repeating history, and what else are you supposed to expect? So I don't know. It's a lot.
Well, let's look at the quarterback position. Taylon Green, Boise State transfer. How's he been since he got here? I know week 1, as you mentioned, it was the 10 straight touchdown drives. Since then, it seems like he's maybe had some accuracy issues and just hasn't been completing at the clip that you'd expect your starting quarterback to. What's he been like through 4 or 5 games so far?
He's the ultimate example of Arkansas is going to go as far as Taylon Green takes Arkansas, because he can have games where he is so good and makes incredible plays, and you're like, man, Taylon Green won him that game. Or he can have the games where he makes so many bad throws and he gets out of the pocket way too quickly and makes bad decisions, and he's late on reads, and he doesn't pull a read option, and they get the fumble against Texas A&M on Texas A&M's goal line. And so like those things are tough, but you take those with the plays where Taylon, is this 6'6" guy who can run 22 miles an hour down the field. Like, he's an incredible dual threat athlete, and he has the arm strength, but he's been late. Like I said, like the theme with Taylon Green this year has been late. He's late on reads. He's late on, getting through his progressions. Most of the time he doesn't really go through them. He's kind of locked in on guys like Andrew Armstrong, who missed the first game, but is like one of the leading receivers in the SEC at this point. He's really the only guy that Taylon throws to. Like, you'll see a little bit of Isaiah Satania, who's a smaller guy. Like, Armstrong's 6'4", 200 and something pounds. Like, he's a big body guy. He's a pro receiver, I think. And so Taylon's kind of like locking in on him and hasn't really been spreading the ball around a whole lot. And that makes it a little bit easier on defenses. Another thing he's doing is like he just gets out of the pocket so quick. And it's kind of not his fault, because the pressure has been a lot. Like the pass protection has not been great for Arkansas. They've been run blocking, fairly decent, not against Texas A&M, but you look at A&M, that's one of the best front sevens in the SEC. But then you look ahead to this week, Tennessee is too. And so it's tough for Arkansas to really figure out what are you going to do, because they're not going to change the offensive line. And Sam Pittman said that on Monday. He doesn't think that a personnel change is what they got to do up front. But what he did say is that Arkansas has a quarterback that's not confident right now. And that's not what you want to hear from the head coach, is that your quarterback is not confident. And it's not a situation, in my opinion, where they're going to bring in another quarterback. It would be Malachi Singleton, the backup. I feel like there's too big of a gap between Green and Singleton as far as, a quarterback that you want in the game that can win you the game. Green can win you the game, but like I said, when I started this, he can also lose you the game, and we've seen a little bit of that.
Kind of a two-parter. Looking at that offensive line, kind of, you said there's maybe been some struggles. I think Sam Pittman said it was kind of the interior that maybe needed to take a step up. What is that going to look like against the Tennessee defensive line that's considered one of the better ones in the country? And then specifically Addison Nichols, obviously a Tennessee transfer. I think Vol fans would like to know maybe how he's kind of transformed into a starting offensive lineman for the Razorbacks.
Yeah, so they brought in Addison Nichols, right from the start to be the center, and that's what he's been doing. That's where he's been. There was a brief moment in fall camp that he played a little bit of guard, but he's been the center. He missed all but 3 snaps of the UAB game. He had an ankle injury, but aside from that, he's been the center. As far as blocking, just pure blocking, I feel like I haven't really had an issue with how he's performed. He's graded out fairly well, but his snapping has been an issue, and it has caused Taylon to miss some snaps. It's caused plays to not really work. Like we've talked with Sam Pittman on Monday, and it seems like it might be more of an issue than we thought, as far as it'll be a play where Addison will snap it, I think, too far to the left or right, one direction, where the plays go in the opposite direction. And so, like, you're telling Taylon, hey, we need you to lean over, get the snap, and then go the other direction. It's just not – the timing's not great there. And I asked Sam, how do you even practice that? Like, what do you have to do? And he kind of gave a little bit of a technical answer, but he's just got to figure it out. So that's what's going on with Addison Nichols. He's got to just snap it straight to Taylon. But the rest of the interior, you look at Joshua Braun, who transferred in from Florida prior to last year. Last year's offensive line was terrible. It was abysmal. It was horrible. But Josh Braun was an all-SEC performer. He was second-team all-SEC. So he's been all right. You look back at the A&M game, there's a few blocks that he whiffed on. But that's what's going to happen. That stuff is going to happen. So he's been all right. And then Imarion Harris is your left guard, who wasn't even supposed to be your starting left guard. But Patrick Kudus, who, Sam Pittman has spoken very highly of. He's in his third year, but he's got a back injury that has held him out since the second practice of fall camp. So it's been Amarion Harris's job at left guard, since the season started. He's a redshirt sophomore, I believe, and he's been pretty good. So a lot of people have been focusing in on the tackles with some of the protection breakdown. But Sam Pittman, interestingly, said Monday that he thinks it's more of the interior, and Taylor needs to have the ability to step up in the pocket, and he's not able to do that. So, like, when the tackles are closing in with the rush, he's not able to step up into the pocket because the interior is also not fully doing their job. So a lot going on. I'll just mention the tackles. Left tackle Fernando Carmona Jr., transfer from San Jose State. He's good. He's really good. There was a story that, some teams tried to get him out of the portal after the spring. Like, he transferred into Arkansas, went through spring ball, held his own against Landon Jackson all spring, a preseason all-SEC DN. And then other teams were like, all right, let's try to get this guy back in the portal. Luckily for Arkansas, he stayed. But on the other side, you got Keyshawn Blackstock, transfer from Michigan State. He's been up and down. His run blocking, it's good. You can deal with that. But his pass protection has been pretty darn bad. So he's got to get that figured out. I mean, at some point, Sam Pittman said he didn't see a personnel change, but if there was one spot where I would maybe consider a personnel change, it would be right tackle. But that's where they're at on the O-line.
Let's flip things to the defensive side. Similar question. What's the strength of this defense? Where are they best at? And then also Danico Slaughter, another Tennessee transfer. What have you seen from him?
It's tough because I want to say the D-line, but they haven't done anything. Like, they really haven't done anything until – Landon Jackson finally broke through a little bit against A&M and got a couple sacks, but I'd have to go with I can't even go with the secondary because they're not healthy in the secondary, so I guess we'll go linebacker. But at linebacker they got Georgia transfer Xavier Sori Jr. He's been good. I thought he looked really good against Texas A&M. They've got a second-year player in Brad Spence who is just he looks like a football player. He looks like a linebacker, and he's younger, so he's having to figure things out a little bit as he goes. But I think that he, plays very physical, very fast. And then you have also two guys that transferred in at the linebacker position, and Steven Dix Jr. and Anthony Switzer, who have kind of been rotating in. Dix took over the starting job in the Auburn game, and so it's kind of him and Spence rotating a little bit, and Sori's kind of the full-time starter. But they'll rotate a lot at linebacker. I mentioned they've been banged up in the secondary. Slaughter has he's been all right. He's been playing the nickel spot, but there have been some teams that have gone right at him, and he struggled, like specifically against UAB. He really struggled. But then the next week, he plays well against Auburn. He had an interception in the Auburn game. So that's been okay at the nickel spot, but at corner they've been hurt. Jalen Braxton, sophomore, who was an all-SEC guy last year as a freshman, he's been hurt. He's dealing with tendonitis. Doesn't sound like he's going to play this week. So they got to figure out. They really haven't figured out a consistent rotation at corner because they've got so many different dudes who they're trying to figure out who's our guys. So you have Marquise Robinson, transfer from South Alabama. He's been probably the most consistent. And then you also have Keon Stewart, former TCU transfer. Sounds like he got sick in the A&M game. So then you had to see Jaheim Singletary, former Georgia transfer. Like they have these transfers from these good sounding programs, but they need them to develop a little bit more, turn into more impact players. I feel good about the safety spot. Jaden Johnson, really experienced, but TJ Metcalf is a sophomore. He comes from the Metcalf family. DK Metcalf is his cousin. Football, it runs in the blood in that family. And TJ Metcalf, he had 4 turnover-worthy plays, or 4 plays that turned into turnovers in the Auburn game. And he won SEC Defensive Player of the Week for that. he's good. But then we'll go up to the D line. I mentioned Landon Jackson earlier. He hadn't done anything all year as far as just like truly making an impact. He had a few plays, but the A&M game, we finally saw like the Landon Jackson that people were talking about. This dude could maybe go in the first round. He's 6'7", 280. Like the size speaks for itself, but he needs to, translate it into making an impact on the game. He did that against A&M. But aside from him, it's like nobody, has really made a big impact on the D-line either. They've got guys, Cam Ball and Eric Gregory in the middle are two bigger guys at tackle, but Nico Davier, Anton Jukosh off the edge, it's just like you got some of these dudes who we talk to in fall camp and hear about them, and it's like, they're going to have a good season. They're looking good. But Arkansas has not generated pressure. I look at it here. They're 15th in the SEC in tackles for loss, 12th or 8th in the SEC in sacks. Like it's just not really, it hasn't really translated a ton yet. So but the thing about the defense though, and I feel like I'm going on, but the thing about the defense is that they have performed well. Like they shut Ollie Gordon down. They shut Jarquez Hunter down. For 3 quarters, they shut down Le'Veon Moss. But it's like kind of later in games, they're starting to break. Like they have a bend don't break defense for 3 quarters, and then the fourth quarter they break. And so that has been a consistent trend as well. You like how they perform to start games. They've been really good, dominant on defense at times. But then late in games, you're starting to see other teams chip away. A&M did that in the fourth quarter. Oklahoma State did that in the fourth quarter. Auburn made some plays in the second half that made you a little bit worried. So can they play a full 4 quarters of football? It's going to be really tough to do against Tennessee. I'm just going to be honest.
So how do you see this one playing out? You don't have to give an exact score if you don't want to, but like, does Arkansas stand a chance? Like where does things kind of lie right now?
I wouldn't say so. But I'm not going to rule out I'm not going to say that Arkansas doesn't have a chance at all.
Mm-hmm.
But Arkansas would have to play a perfect game. They would have to have guys step up who have not at all this year. They're beat up after a hard game against Texas A&M. That was kind of a theme of Sam Pittman's press conference on Monday. A guy who could really make an impact is at the tight end position. Luke has a second-year player who he played only 4 games last year before he got hurt. He broke his collarbone, but we were looking at him like this guy is a star. He's going to be an all SEC tight end, and that's what we've seen him practice as well. But he's got a back injury that kind of flared up against Oklahoma State. It's really seems like it's been bothering him since, and then he left the A&M game. That's a guy who could make an impact and make game-winning plays. I don't know if they're even going to have him against Tennessee. So I mentioned Jalen Braxton. You need to have Jalen Braxton. They're probably not going to. So it's going to have to be a Taylon Green perfect game. I feel like I haven't even talked about Jaquindon Jackson, the running back from transfer from Utah. He's got a touchdown in every single game. He's a pro. Like he's really good. But A&M held him to 10 carries for 37 yards, and that was easily his worst performance of the year. So all that to say, Arkansas is not going to win this game. Our local sports book that sponsors us, Bet Saracen here in Arkansas, has Tennessee as a 13.5-point favorite. I feel like that could be too low of a number. And Arkansas hasn't performed well at home under Sam Pittman either. That's kind of a weird thing with these Sam Pittman teams, is that Arkansas has almost been a better team on the road than they've been at home. So I don't know. You look back at the history of the series, the last time Arkansas beat a top 4 team at home was in 1999 against Tennessee. So like maybe it's just something against Tennessee because the Hogs have won 3 straight in the series too. So we'll see. But I just look at Tennessee. I've watched some of their games this year, the NC State game, the Oklahoma game. I don't see a way that Arkansas can win this one, to be honest.
Well, Mason, thank you for hopping on. If you're a Tennessee fan and you're listening and you want to be the smartest person watching the game this weekend about what's going on the opposite side of the field, make sure you head over to hogbeat.com. They do a great job over there covering Arkansas. Check out Mason on Twitter at Choate Mason. You can see his handle right there on the screen. But Mason, thank you again for hopping on.
Absolutely, man. Enjoyed it.
Yeah, links to everything you guys need is in the description. Thank you for watching.